We started the week by focusing on the World AIDS Conference unfolding in Munich, Germany. And we thought we'd end the week by reflecting on some of the outcomes of the conference and particularly, of course, what is next for South Africa in the fight against HIV/AIDS. And I can tell you there is good news. We're poised to make significant strides against HIV. There's a substantial donation from PEPFAR. This is the US government's AIDS fund. And essentially, it's going to allow us a rollout of a nationwide initiative to provide that highly effective HIV prevention jab. And they're going to roll this out to nearly 900 government health facilities across the country. You may remember we spoke to Charles Lyons of the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. Today is the last day of the conference, and I'm so pleased to tell you we're speaking today to Mia Malan, who's the editor-in-chief of Bhekisisa, and they do fantastic work in the health journalism space to track all of this for us. Mia, thank you so much for your time. I imagine it's been a great conference so far. What are some of the key takeaways?
So I think globally, the biggest news at the conference is actually a South African researcher, Linda Galbecko, who led the research on medicine called lenacapavir. That is an injection that you can take twice a year. And in this trial that they tested it, no one who took it contracted HIV. So it's for HIV negative people who take it to prevent themselves from getting infected with HIV. But the thing is, it's one thing to have a trial and get good results. It's a completely different story to roll something like that out, because you need to look at so many things. People are not going to magically wake up the next morning and want it. So you need to create a market. And there's the price. And at the moment, this lenacapavir is also used in the United States as treatment, also twice a year that you take it for people who already have HIV. And it costs $42,000 a year. So we need to look at bringing that price down significantly. One of the reasons it's so expensive, it's because it's only used for extremely drug-resistant HIV. So it's produced in very small quantities. So the more that you produce, the cheaper it will get. And the other thing is to get it registered. It's not registered anywhere in the world for prevention at the moment, only for treatment. And that is probably going to take us at least another 2 years to see registration. So it's one thing to have great results. It's a completely different reality to roll something like that out and make it available for people and get them to use it.
But quite clearly, things are pointing in the right direction. Mia, talk to me about the injection that is already approved and this PEPFAR donation for South Africa.
Yes, so that injection is slightly different. It uses a different drug called cabotegravir. Cabotegravir is the antiretroviral drug, so it's the same type of medicine that you use to treat people with HIV. But in the case of this injection, it's long-acting. That's why it's called CAB-LA, which means that you can put it in someone's body and it's released over a period of time. And that is why you can take this injection once every 2 months. And CAB-LA is registered in South Africa. But up until now, we haven't been able to afford it. It's about 4 times more priced, the price that it's available for countries like South Africa, than what the government can afford to pay. And how they determine sort of like what is the realistic price is they compare it to what we pay for the daily HIV prevention pill. And it works out about 4 times more expensive. And if we want to roll it out in a cost-effective way, we need to get more or less the same price. But PEPFAR, as you mentioned, that's the AIDS fund of the US government, did donate 230,000 doses to South Africa over a period of 2 years. The first batch will arrive in the last quarter of this year, and we will roll it out at 900 clinics. It's not a lot of doses. It's a great donation, but it's not going to cover everyone who needs it. But it's a great start, and it looks like the Global Fund may also actually roll it out. The thing about the injection is, if you compare it to the pill that we have at the moment, the pill you need to take daily, and you need to take it home, and people are going to know that you take it if they see your pills or find it. With the injection, you can pretty much take it without anyone knowing that you take it, and you only have to go back every 2 months. The challenge with the pill is that people don't adhere that well to it. They forget to take it every single day. And at the conference here, we have implementation trials in South Africa. Those aren't trials that test whether the drug works or not. It tests how do people want it, where do they want it, do they even want it? And some of the very early results of those trials were released here in Munich. And interestingly enough, it showed that when you give people a choice between the oral pill and the vaginal ring, which is another way that you can use to prevent HIV, and Cap LA, about 3/4 of them in many of these implementation trials switched and wanted to have the injection, especially people who use the ring and the pill up until now. So that is good news.
Let's talk about the UNAIDS 95-95 targets. And as I understand it, of course, it was all about meeting the sexual reproductive health service needs of 95% of women within the reproductive age, 95% of pregnant and breastfeeding women living with HIV to achieve viral suppression, and 95% of HIV-exposed children tested by 2025. How are we tracking there?
So actually, the 95 targets refer to our entire population. So it's not just children or not just women, but within that entire population, when we measure those targets, we also look at the different population groups so that we are sure that, and sort of have data to know where we need to spend more resources. Now, in South Africa's case, what those targets mean is we need to, the reason they're called 95, and they need to be reached by the end of next year, it's really all about getting people onto treatment. So to get people on treatment, you first need to know who's got HIV. So the first 95 means you need to go and find 95% of people with HIV, say in South Africa, and get them diagnosed with it. And then of that 95%, you want to get 95% onto treatment. And of the 95% of people who are onto treatment, you want them to use their treatment so well so that they get virally suppressed. And that's just a smart word to say they've got so little HIV in their body that it's scientifically impossible for them to spread it to someone else through sex. Now, in South Africa's case, we're not doing badly with the first 95. Where we're struggling a little bit is the second 95 to get people onto treatment. We're at 78% at the moment, and we need to be at 95 by the end of next year. So we need to make sure that we get people who have HIV to be under treatment. If you look at the larger figures, so not just the 95%, but largely of people with HIV in South Africa, how many of them are on treatment? There's 1/4 of them who are not on treatment. And treatment is not just about getting people healthy and contributing to the economy. It's also about prevention, because the more people you get onto treatment and get them to use it correctly, the slower HIV will spread, because it's also prevention.
Yeah.
It allows you not to spread it. But the interesting and good news thing is that for the first time in the history of HIV, there are fewer HIV infections within sub-Saharan Africa than outside of it. So the rate at which new infections are declining in sub-Saharan Africa is faster than it is in the rest of the world. And that's great news.
I suppose ultimately the fight against this thing is is far from over, and that's a long time away, hey?
Well, if you ask HIV scientists and activists, is HIV over? They will warn you and say it's not over, because remember, we have a goal, the UN has a goal, and South Africa subscribed to that by 2030 we want to end AIDS as a public health threat. So it doesn't mean no infections, it just means low enough infections so that it's no longer a threat. And for that, the world, unfortunately, is not on track. We're unlikely to make those goals. Now, to make that 2030 goal, they have these 2025 goals, to keep us on track halfway along the line. And it doesn't look, some countries in Africa are on track, but largely in the world, many aren't. And what is emerging now is that there are 3 regions in the world where HIV infections are actually increasing. And that's in Eastern Europe and Central Asia and Latin America, and also in Middle East and North Africa.
Mia Malan, appreciate your time, Editor-in-Chief for Bhekisisa. And as I say, they do enormous work to promote health journalism and just to make it also accessible for the average person. Appreciate your time.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions,
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.